What an interesting panel we just had. Well, my name is Fabricia, and I'll be your session chair for the next few hours. Our next talk here is titled Fireside Chat with you, Łukasz Langa and Dustin Ingram about their favorite tools, packages, and workflows for advanced Python development. Well, Łukasz is a Python core developer, the release manager of Python 3.8 and 3.9, and the creator of Black. Dustin is a developer advocate at Google, focused on supporting the Python community on Google Cloud. He's also the director of the Python Software Foundation, maintaining of the Python Package Index, and the organizer for the PyTexas conference. Welcome, Łukasz and Dustin. How are you guys doing?
We're great. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, doing great.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Welcome to PyCascade. I confess that I'm not that great at finding these kinds of tools on my own, so it will be awesome to hear what you guys have to say. I'll leave the stage now, and you can start. Good luck.
All right, cool.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, so hey everybody. I think this is going to be sort of an informal chat with me and Łukasz just sort of talking about what we're working on right now and some of the tools we use. And some of the stuff that we've worked on, I think, has been in the news lately and is more timely. So I think maybe we want to talk about that a little bit. So Łukasz, we just had a new Python release just recently, right? And you're the release manager for 3.8 and 3.9.
Yes, I am. So early in the week, we did release 3.8.8 RC1, right? So release candidate, and 3.9.2 RC1 as well. We've had some security content in those releases. So like the release notes and announcements had the security content kind of front and center, saying, hey, there's 2 CVEs that we addressed, kind of please download your new version. Turns out that, for some reason, for this once, this was a controversial issue that we issued release candidates instead of, like golden final versions for those CVEs. So I've been contacted by quite a few people and quite a few organizations to rush the final release, which we did, and we released that on Friday. So yeah, like now, like you're all safe. Well, as long as your downstream provider is already upgraded. No, but like honestly, obviously, security is very important for us. But like then the CVE that was most controversial and landed on the front page of Hacker News, like like let's just say that maybe its severity was a little overblown on the orange page. So
Yeah,
like
it's
kind of.
supposedly remote code execution when you evaluate a float, but it didn't seem like that was really possible
Yeah,
in
so
practice.
it's not really the case, right? Like to actually make it a successful remote code execution, what would have to happen is you would have to have an untrusted floating point number that some user prepares for you. You get it, you put it in a C-type C double, so not the regular floating points of Python, and then you get a wrapper of that C-types object. And through that wrapper, you actually store in those strings that are the actual wrapper, you store code that you then successfully overwrite the stack with. And it just so happens that it just like is overriding the stack in a way that circumvents your stack protection and ends up actually executing. So like having like a practical exploit for this is so it's maybe not very probable. However, what you can do much easier through providing a malicious floating point number like this is to crash your application. So it's still a serious issue. So we issued the updates. The updates were pending anyway. I originally planned to issue them a little sooner. Like the like life intervened. I had death in the family, so I had. That only goes to show that kind of there's real people behind the projects that you're using. So kind of sometimes just life happens, and like the priorities are sometimes kind of impossible to well meet. Yeah. So the releases are out. The sad thing about this for me personally is that kind of when I'm trying to gauge how popular a version of Python is, what I do is I go to PyPI stats and look at urllib3, right? Because it's the most popular package on PyPI. If you're using the internet in your application in any way, you probably use urllib3, right?
I have to correct you. It's the most downloaded package, but I think downloads are a bad proxy for popularity. It's just the dependency for so many things. So it has
Sure,
definitely the
yes.
highest download
Like
count.
indirectly maybe, right? Like, kind of
Yeah.
you have them in your application, but like, it does appear a lot. So I'm looking at those stats and I'm seeing that, like the most popular version of Python now, hooray, is 3.8. So yeah, like we're firmly in the Python 3 stage of the project. So like all that's good. However, Python 3.9 like lags behind. It's kind of 14 times fewer downloads on Python 3.9 compared to 3.8. So, kind of, I don't know what's the hold up there, but, like I hope with 3.9.2 and so on, like, we're going to see more adoption of Python 3.9. Like it's got some very nice features. So, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I saw the post go on the Orange site, as you called it, or Hacker News, and I was one of the first people to see it. So I left a comment. I was like, look, hey, this is already fixed. This is when the releases went out for 3.6 and 7. This is when they'll go out for 3.8. And this is before we expedited the releases, obviously. And I kind of wanted people to see like, yeah, this was, we knew about this a month ago and it was fixed there. And it's not maybe as the sky is falling as Hacker News maybe makes it out to be. But it's interesting you mentioned PyPI stats because we just I work on PyPI and we just launched a new data set for PyPI. It's now an official like Google public data set, and that's what it uses under the hood. We just like publish all this stuff to this. Basically every time you download something off of PyPI, we get a little log message in our CDN, and then we turn that into a row in BigQuery, and we just have this massive data set. So you can actually, if PyPI stats was, you wanted to go a little more deeper into those statistics, you could, load up BigQuery and write a query and just sort of see like exactly what operating system people are using 3.8 and 3.9 on. That kind of stuff is pretty cool. We just launched that. Well, the data set's been around for a while, but we relaunched as a official public data set just the other week.
Yeah, speaking about PyPI, like you were busy with security yourself, lately. Can you tell us more about what was happening? Many people heard that there's some issue with PyPI. It was also on Hacker News, but like what's going on?
Yeah, and I guess we're both a little bit in the news, or our projects are rather, but so that there's, I don't think I can't say we've really been working on it super hard. The thing that's taken up our time lately is responding to some press inquiries about it. But so there's, I guess people are calling it supply chain confusion. And it's sort of something that happens from time to time. And we're aware of it as sort of a way that it can cause problems when you use PyPI. But basically, what happens is a lot of big companies, they not just use PyPI, but they have private internal PyPI servers as well. And they publish their own software there, and they're private. And you can configure pip in a way that you can sort of install from either. So you can say install my private package, install this public package, and pip will just figure out where to go and look for it. But the way that works is it sort of looks at both and sees where those packages exist. So the attack that was sort of documented in this article by this particular person was about going to public PyPI and registering package names that matched ones that people were using internally. So he did a lot of work actually to figure out what those package names were, because they had to be the exact same package name. But once he figured that out and published some dummy package to PyPI, he was able to, the pip would sometimes install that, and that would could be a malicious package. And so this sort of falls in the category of stuff where there's not a whole lot PyPI could do. It's kind of like a configuration thing. Like at the end of the day, when you're installing stuff from PyPI or from pip, you're possibly executing arbitrary code, and you have to sort of vet what that is. So there's a lot of workarounds. Like for example, if they had done version pinning or added hashes for pip, so pip has the ability to sort of hash the file that it's downloading and determine if it's right or not, that could potentially avoided it. One thing that we've seen happening is a lot of big companies that have these private packages, they come to PyPI and they just squatted all the names for their internal packages, so it can't happen again. I don't think that's the best workaround. But yeah, it was in the news, and he did not just API, but with a couple other package ecosystems as well, like npm and some other ones too. So yeah, it's a real thing, and I think we're gonna try and improve our documentation a little bit around how to properly configure for this kind of scenario, because at the end of the day, we're mostly concerned about keeping PyPI up and running, and less about what people are doing inside their own their own networks and things like that. But it seems like that is also part of the general best security practices for PyPI. So
Sure,
yeah,
cool.
you'll see more from us there soon.
Yeah, so let's maybe bring the talk a little bit on topic, which
Yeah.
is about like our favorite tools. So hey, what's your favorite tool to package on Python? Like, are you a poetry user? Like, kind of is pipenv still a thing? Like, what's going on in packaging?
Yeah, for packaging, interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of packaging tools, and I think they all sort of serve some slightly different use cases. I've been working with the Python Packaging Authority and contributing to their projects for a while. So that's like basically pip. Pipenv is under that umbrella now too. I'm pretty bare bones. I like to use just basically pip, occasionally virtual env, but not even that often these days. And and actually you can sort of get by with a lot of just those tools. One thing I do really like that's not in vanilla pip is the Pip Tools package, which includes pip compile. And this is a workflow that I've seen some folks talk about here and there, but it's really nice where, and it sort of resolves the supply chain issue that we were just talking about, where you can write a requirements file that just sort of lists your top level dependencies and then compiles it. So what that means is it acts as if it was going to install those packages, figures out all the subdependencies for all of them. So you end up with an actual requirements file that has exact versions pinned for all of them. You can turn on hashes, so it'll supply all the hashes. And so then at the end of the day, you have this very simple file that describes what you actually need to run your application or project or whatever. But then what you actually install is this more complex file. And it kind of ends up looking a little bit like a lock file. So if you use pipenv, it looks like that too. But it uses all the same mechanics that pip uses, and pip just installs it directly because it's just a regular requirements file. I really like that tool. It's supported by the Jazz Band project right now, which is sort of like a amalgamation of folks supporting various open source projects that do this and that. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. Gotta say, I really like Black too. I'm kind of curious. I know like a long time ago,
Yeah.
there were a lot of other auto formatters, sorry. Like I know about YAPF, which was a Google project actually, which was a very configurable auto formatter for Python that I think it didn't really take off. And I'm curious, like, when did you kind of get the idea to develop that project, or what started that process?
Oh, so actually, Yap did kind of convince me to start on the project, and the reason why is that like back in, I don't remember, 2015, I actually did contribute to Yap. Like I think to this day it does have like a Facebook code style, which is essentially like the code style that we wanted to see, and it wasn't really possible before in Yap, which is the kind of the closing parents that are outdented, right? So that even if you are not using dictionaries or lists, but you are calling functions, or defining a function, like the parentheses pairs behave the same way. So I did contribute to Yap at that point, and the plan was that we are gonna roll it out like at Facebook where I was at the time. And it's not an easy task where you have like kind of what is it, like over 20 million lines of code in Python. I know as a Google employee you probably just kind of just look at it and like yeah kind of your tiny code bases, but yeah, for us it was a lot. And what we found out is that we just cannot do this rollout. Like it's impossible. And the reason why is that Yap has this like super smart way of defining what is nice. And the way they do this is that they do dynamic programming, minimizing a number, right? And what is the number that you minimize? Well, you minimize what you hate about a given line. So you unwind it so that it's as long as possible, right? Then you just apply some simple white space to it. So, for example, you want to have, I don't know, spaces around plus operator operators and stuff like this. But then you actually meet the hardest problem, which is, oh, we now need to fit it in some column limit, right? So what they do is they, kind of try out a lot of different, splits, and then apply a score to each of those. And through configuration, you actually say which things you don't want to see in your split lines, right? For example, you don't want to see operators on the right side or the left side or whatnot, or you don't want to see a stranded operator, just on one line, or you don't want to see a closing parenthesis on the same line, on a separate line, stuff like this. So you actually are able to express this with numbers. So just put a very decent configuration there. And so far, so good. Like for one project, it might actually look decent. It might format things like, to be perfectly, tenable, perfectly aesthetic. However, then you move on to another project and you find out that, oh, there's this one example that I don't like. So you just change one number from 47 to 48, for example. And that new project now formats great, but the old project started formatting differently. And with all that configuration, we were just unable to find out this magic, set of numbers that would satisfy everybody. So, kind of long story short, a few years later, we were still formatting manually and just, wasting, I don't know how many hours of developers like with review, just, arguing about simple stuff. So we actually had somebody, kind of try out rewriting a formatter, but just a simple one that, like essentially I just showed him JSON tool and said, hey, like, can you do the same for Python? Just, just the simplest thing possible. Like, for a number of reasons that didn't work out. So I was like, hey, maybe that was a bit of a hard task to give to a new person on the team. So I just tried it out for myself. And it turned out to be actually tenable for me at the time. So I just released an alpha version of it. I was targeting my birthday, but obviously, deadlines are there to be broken. So I released a week later, which happens to be Pi Day. So yeah, awesome. Like, let's release on Pi Day.
That's nice.
So I did. Yeah, and the first day I had 500 stars on GitHub because kind of Kenneth writes, just showed it to people, and somebody reformatted their code with it already on day one, like first alpha. So kind of it gained a lot of traction really quick. I'm very happy about it. Now it's slowed down. That's my fault. But we're gonna get back to it. There's actually a person now, like very aggressively fixing, like kind of the remaining issues with it. Like James Addison, like if you're listening, like thank you. Like I'm reviewing your diffs as we go. So you should see a release soon. Kind of meeting another Pi Day would be, I guess, a good deadline. Or maybe I should.
That's an interesting release cadence, just every birthday and Pi Day.
Maybe I should do birthday, because then when I miss it, I can still make Pi Day. So yeah, let's target my birthday then.
Yeah, I love it because you mentioned how like it was costing people developer time to just do reformat and argue about reformatting and actually just fix the linting errors. That kind of stuff takes time too. And I think one of the things in the abstract for this particular session is something called sloppy programming, which I think Black has allowed me to embody, because now I just write whatever Python I want, and then I actually have my editor set up to auto format every time I save a file. So then it just writes it out, and I don't even think about it, and it's really nice. It does save a lot of time.
Yeah, I obviously also use it a lot. So it actually, not only lets me format code on save, so I can just write like very, very ugly code when I do spit out my thoughts to the editor, and then it kind of formats it for me. But also sometimes it formats it in a very ugly way. And through that, it shows me that maybe an expression that goes on for 7 lines is a little too complex. So maybe I should, split it into 2 expressions, 3 lines each. And sometimes actually they are now short enough to fit in 4 lines. So like, kind of even more win. So it kind of to this point, it cannot be fully automatic. Sometimes refactoring our code not to format in a super ugly way, but that's a win to some extent. It's very simple, So yeah, like let's hope it reaches stable version soon enough. Yeah, let's see, what other tools are you using for your workflow?
Let's see. What else has been interesting lately? So I mean, it's actually funny because I was just going to add that, now I work on, kind of show up and work on some open source projects here and there, depending on what needs done. And
Yeah.
I kind of don't want to work on things that aren't projects that aren't blackened anymore, mostly because, my editor is already set up to auto do it. So yeah, I go around trying to do that sometimes. That's a lot of work. Yeah, I mean, what else? Always a lot of work on PyPI. So there's a lot of security work that we're going to try and do there in the future as well. In terms of tools and stuff, been playing a little bit with VS Code. I'm definitely a VI user mostly, but
Oh, cool.
um,
Same here.
yeah. So did you
How
switch
do you
recently,
find?
or?
No, I switched a long time ago, like to VS Code because what I did use like originally, like when I first started with Python, is Eclipse with PyDev, really, because
Yeah,
that's like I came from Java in 2004, so obviously
me too.
Python plugin and let's go. But then I went to my first conference back in 2008. It was a EuroPython, first international conference, and I saw Honza Kral, kind of working in VI, and that looked like science fiction to me. Like he hated me for the next decade for what I did to him at this conference because I just kept just walking with my laptop behind him saying like, hey, how did you do that in Vim? And how did you do that? So, like he was my original tutor for that editor, and like I've been using it ever since. I was never happy with it because it always takes you like 80% there for every feature, right? So I mean, like it doesn't have any shining features there. Like there's always something off, right? There's regular expressions, yes, they're there, but they're different than any other regular expression. Like kind of you have viml, but it's also kind of sucky for a number of reasons, right? You have syntax highlighting that is really kind of weird. Like it cannot successfully highlight Python because it's too primitive, right? It gets us 80% there, so mostly you don't see issues with it. But like believe me, like okay, there's a bunch of things that it cannot just format successfully, and so on and so on. So at Facebook, we actually could use Vim on your dev server, where you log in remotely to the actual strong machine where you're developing your stuff. But that's annoying for a number of reasons, right? Because kind of it's a different machine. You only have your terminal. So there was this plugin of Adam called Nuclide where you could just work on your code as if it was local, but it was actually on a development server. And that worked for a while. But then, kind of Adam started being, sort of left behind by GitHub, and then with the acquisition, it was kind of clear that Visual Studio Code is going to be the one that's going to be in active development from now on. So I switched to that, and Brett convinced me to actually, hey, just jump in on it. I'm on the Python team. If anything doesn't work for you, just let us know. And one of the things that I wanted was remote development, and it's there now. Actually, you can, for example, just code in your Docker container as if stuff was on your disk, and a number of other niceties like this. So I like it. The Vim emulation, though, Brett, if you're listening, kind of get somebody, who actually uses Vim to, try it out and just fix a bunch of things. Like I don't know like what your personal experience with this is, Dustin, but I find it sometimes not doing the right thing like every so often.
Yeah, once in a while, it does get in the way. Yeah, so I want to take a break here real quick because I want to mention to everybody watching that we would love to answer questions as well, and we don't just have to talk about our editors of choice this entire time. And there are a few questions in the chat already, so maybe we can chat about some of them. So one of them is debuggers. Any opinion on debuggers? I'll say that I like debuggers. I don't use them super often with Python. When I do, I just use the built-in debugger usually. I'm maybe kind of old school in that sense, but Łukasz, do you use a debugger? What do you use?
Yeah, so the thing is this. First of all, yeah, like PDB is something that should be taught like, very, 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 very quickly, and to new people that use Python, because it is really a REPL that you have inside your application, like a manhole, where you can try things out from the context of code running, somewhere in some function. So I use that all the time. For small code where it's very easy to do this. Sometimes it's not, because it's, I don't know, multi-processed, multi-threaded, or it's on a different machine. And this is, again, where VS Code comes in, because, you can actually debug code, and it doesn't really matter if it's on your box or another box. So, for example, if you want to debug code in a container, you can do that. So that is pretty handy. It is, in fact, using BDB and some Visual Studio Code extensions on top of it on the, container end. So it's still kind of, almost PDB in the protocol, but you don't feel it because you just see your editor. So if you haven't tried it out, kind of just give it a go. It's good. Debuggers I find are very important, because kind of they are much faster to use than just putting a print to just debug a variable and then removing that print. Sometimes you forget to remove that print, and it's embarrassing.
It's definitely happened
this
to
sort
me.
of thing. Yeah, so like another debugger that I actually just have right here, like this is an SWD debugger for microcontrollers, and I do have some microcontrollers that I play with right now. Like those are Raspberry Pi Picos, right?
Nice.
And they do have the debugger output there, so you can actually connect them and debug your code that way. So even in this world where you would think, this is going to be hard, right? Like debuggers are a thing, and I highly recommend them. How about this? You answered the other question, which is security-focused static analysis tools like Bandit.
Yeah. So I'm guessing this is maybe in the context of the PyPI work we were talking
Yeah.
about, which is, it's something that we always think about PyPI. One common thing that people do there is try and typo squat on popular names. So if you make a typo, you might install some potentially malicious code. And we have some sort of prototype analysis tools. So one thing that I should be clear about is that like PyPI doesn't try to install or do anything with the package. Basically, we trust you. You say this is a Python package, and we say, okay, we're putting it on PyPI. And there's not really a lot of filtering. Like we validate that the metadata is right, and that's about it. We are hopefully planning to add some static analysis tools that try to maybe execute the package, maybe try to see some patterns in the source to see what it's trying to do, if it's trying to make external requests and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the volume of packages on PyPI is pretty high, and the potential for false positives here is pretty high as well. And there's a very limited staff. There's a couple of volunteers that work on PyPI, and we don't really have like a huge bunch of paid staff to sit through and sift through every day and deeply inspect all of these. So we're going to try and prototype some stuff and see what we can do here to find some, potentially, bad packages that might get published. But at the end of the day, my advice is always, if you're installing something, you should, download it first and sort of take a look at it and see what it's doing, because it's the only way to really know for sure whether it's a package that you want or something that's going to cause problems. And yeah, Bandit is one thing. There's a couple other tools that we're thinking about implementing there for PyPI, but that's a project that's going to be in the works over the next year probably, and maybe you'll hear more about that in the future.
Cool. I personally haven't used Bandit. My personal favorite static analysis tool is MyPy. I know I'm biased, but like really, it's changed how I write code.
Would you call that security focused?
Well, so interestingly, there is a type checker at Facebook for Python, and that one called Pyre started out with this notion that we need a type checker first as a base, but then on top of that type checker, we can build security-based static analysis tools. For example, to actually find well, I don't want to use like internal terms, but the idea being data that are passed unchecked and escaped from the user to some API or like internal API or database or whatnot, right? So the point being that like each kind of input from a user should be in some way sanitized, right, or validated, so that that removes a bunch of problems with not only SQL injection, but certain patterns that are just either causing denials of service or other issues, right? So this sort of tool is being built by Facebook. I wish them luck on it. I haven't really tried Pyre since leaving, but it's a project that for PHP was in active use, and it saved their butts quite a few times. So I do see that I did see the value of a tool like this, just I haven't seen it done for Python yet. But MyPy we have right now, and the nice thing about MyPy these days is that with the recent release of 0.800, you can now use the 3.9 feature of just using lowercase list and lowercase dict and so on. Like I wanted this since we started talking about typing, static typing in Python. So like, I'm very, very, very happy to see this work. And also there's a follow-up PEP called PEP 604 around using binary or operators for type unions. So for example, instead of saying union, I don't know, list of string and none, you just say list of string, binary or none, and that's much cleaner in reading, much shorter in writing, so like everybody wins. That's a 3.10 feature. However, secret I can share with you is that like if you are using the future import for annotations, now all annotations are in fact not evaluated at runtime. You can use that today. MyPy understands it, so kind of you can have this feature right now. So yeah, like that is definitely something that I could recommend.
Yeah, MyPy is really nice. The static typing is nice too. I did a whole talk on that at PyCon last year, and I was surprised actually how interested people were in adopting static typing. I think it's great, and always try to push forward. We have some more questions.
Cool.
I'll take this one. It's an easy one. Is there a way to report suspicious packages on PyPI? Yes, you can email admin@pypi.org, or we also have a PyPI support GitHub repo, and you can file an issue there. But the best way is just to email us directly. And yeah, if you see something that looks weird, please feel free to send us something about it. Another PyPI related questions. Do we have any plans to turn search back on? So contentious. Are you aware of this particular question? Łukasz, do you know what they're talking about?
Well, I have noticed this, but I don't know the background at all on this. So I'm interested myself.
Yeah, so basically, pip search doesn't work right now.
Yeah.
And the reason is because we turned the API off. And
yes,
the reason we turned the API off is because it's quite an old API that we created. It's XML RPC. And the downside to that API is not that it's XML, it's that the way it works, they pass our CDN. We don't have a great way to cache them. And so, for a long time, we were sort of just, that was fine. And we were sort of in concept of not being able to cache these API requests. But it also kind of, unfortunately, means that folks that are malicious, or maybe not intentionally malicious, but, holding the tool the wrong way, maybe have the potential to really consume a lot of resources on PyPI's end. And that started happening about a month ago, or a month or maybe more. I can't keep track of time these days. So we temporarily disabled it, and we were hoping that sometimes when we turn it off, people stop doing the weird thing, and we can turn it back on again. But that hasn't happened yet. So we've been talking about a couple of things. Basically, there's a plan to provide a nicer, I think I dropped there for a second, a nicer cacheable API for search and some other things as well. We need folks to build it and implement it. So we're still sort of in the planning phase for that. But eventually, yeah, I think we do want to turn it back on. But for now, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the resources to turn it back on directly.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So let me take the Black question then. Every new version of Black that changes its opinion on my code would introduce new Git diffs. What is your opinion on pinning to one Black version, and then with every new Python version, a migration repin to the latest Black? So to be perfectly open, this is my greatest fear. And since starting the project and it gathering traction much faster than I anticipated, that was the one thing that I knew that this is a formatter. So literally any change that you're making, you're probably making to change some formatting, right? So obviously the more adoption you have, and if you don't believe in configuration settings, like the more kind of churn there's going to be for existing users. So yes, I highly recommend people pin to a version like NASA did with their usage of black for the lander software F prime. I was very happy to see that the other day.
Yeah, that's cool.
In any case, you should pin your versions, and then when you're ready, and you just do another big commit that kind of maybe isn't the nicest commit to have, but with current Git tooling, you can just put it in a config file so that it's skipped by blame and whatnot. So like, kind of mostly no foul. If you do too many of those commits though, this is quadratic performance in Git blame, so you might not want to have too many commits in that file. But like other than that, kind of it's good. Yeah, so I highly recommend you pin. This is the reason why we haven't actually had like a stable release yet, because with the stable release, I understand that we aren't gonna do big, turnarounds on formatting anymore. And so far, like I wasn't ready to commit to the existing formatting because there's a number of issues with it. These are, I don't know, so some of them are fixable, some of them are not. The biggest non-fixable thing currently is that we are based on a parser that is LL1, and now Python itself switched to a peg parser. So it's
Oh,
gonna
who did
be
that?
yeah. So I'm actually very happy to see this as a design thing because, for example, unblocked pattern matching, in fact, but it does complicate life for a tool like Black. So we're gonna have to rethink, like what are you gonna do about this? Because essentially changing the parser is a rewrite of the tool. If you open, the code to Black, like, that essentially the entire thing is very tightly coupled to the CSD that we have there.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a follow-up question, but now I forgot what it was. I'll answer an easy PyPI question while we're thinking of that.
All right.
The question is there a way to search for packages on PyPI that don't have a classifier? And so our search like on pypi.org obviously still works, and you can search things there. There's not the ability to exclude classifiers or other search terms right now. It's feature requests that we've had for a while, and we just, that's not the highest priority. At the end of the day, we are keeping PyPI online, keeping it performant, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, we haven't had time to focus on improving the search a whole lot more. But yeah, there's a lot of improvements to make there. If anyone is like a search guru, we'd love some support and feedback there. It'd be great. Yeah, what else? I see a question about. So I'll add also. I'm not sure if this came up, but there, if you're not familiar with packaging for Python or you want to get started with it, there's a really nice user guide at packaging.python.org that sort of walks you through a lot of the sort of more common intro stuff and gives you some workflows with some of the common tools. So definitely worth checking out. All right, here's a question directed directly at you. Why didn't Łukasz release a special red edition for NASA of Black, I assume, yeah.
I wasn't aware that they're at all using any of my tools. So like obviously kind of, in some sense we are all part of this because, if NASA is using Python, then like, we are part of this Mars landing, which I think is huge. Like it's cool.
Super awesome.
Yeah. But also kind of having my silly tool used by them directly is, kind of, I don't know, like it made my day really, like yesterday, like, kind of, I was thinking about this, that essentially all life is entropy, right? Like universe is entropy, like, there's no happy ending, right? But
well, we're getting philosophical, I see.
Right. Yes, but in life, like we're just having those like small attempts at reversing entropy, at making life better just for a short while. And like that really felt like one of those moments where like, that was cool. Yeah, like I see a question about visualization. I really don't have a great answer for visualization per se because I'm old school there. I'm still using Pillow for imaging and Matplotlib for say actually drawing graphs because it generates me a tickle UI that I can play with. I'm not really a strong Jupyter user, but I want to show you something. So like let me maybe try to share my screen. We'll see if that works actually for us. If not, then that's okay. But if we actually can show you
Yeah.
a screen here.
While you're
Can you
doing that,
see
I
it?
remembered what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Can't see it
Yeah,
yet.
cool. So
You
if
mentioned,
we
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, like can we actually yeah, so that's Python, right? And I do have Rich installed here. If you haven't seen Rich yet, it is actually like a very, very nice, let me just put it in less way to make awesome like command line use. So this is something that I only discovered very, very recently, and I've been user ever since. It abstracts away not only the things that you already see on the screen, which are like frankly very, very boring, but also like more interesting stuff like table support, like syntax highlighting for code, which is actually very, very nicely done. Like markdown support just killed me because it is just very, very nicely done. And like stuff like progress bars. So I just tested this the other day, and kind of it is just so nice, like compared to what I'm used to. So it is not visualization in the sense that you probably meant, right, when you asked your question, person. But the thing is, like this is some form of visualization on the command line, and I find it very, very impressive.
That's
So
super cool.
if you haven't heard of Rich, like try it out. Like that is my latest discovery.
Now, I know about TQDM, which I've used before for progress bar stuff, and it's kind of nice because you can just import a single function and then wrap any iterable in it, and it will do a progress bar as it moves to that iterable. Do you know if Rich has something like that?
I haven't really needed that particular thing, so I don't know. But what I can tell you is that Rich is not only a good tool, but the code base is amazing to look at. So I highly recommend you try it out because it's uh, as far as I can tell, like fully type annotated. It is very clean. Kind of I was wondering about kind of a bunch of things in their implementation and could find my way around the code base very, very quickly. So Will McGuigan, I think, is the pronunciation of the author. He's also an actual author of books, like writing a book about Pygame. Like he's a good guy. Like you should look him up. So yeah, like I've been impressed by Rich and using it in my silly personal code the other day. So yeah, highly recommended.
We are coming up on time. I think we have another question in here. Oh, we got a couple more. Thoughts on Pilot, thoughts on auto rerunning unit tests on file save, and thoughts on PyProject.toml. Which one do we want to answer?
Yeah, so Pylint maybe. So there's two big linters, right, in our land. There's Flake8 and there's Pylint. Pylint is closer to like the Yap philosophy of like having like a million toggles that you can configure. And I always found the default to be like really weird, like kind of you just put it, point it at a new project and it says, oh, code quality -1 of 10. Like, okay, thank you. I don't know, like, is it that bad? Yeah, so I always find it a little intimidating. And it's got like a bunch of rules that were like opinionated like black, but had the reverse opinions. So we've had some discussions over the years about like who's right. And obviously, like the real answer is like nobody is, but like who cares, right? Like kind of just let's just move on. Yeah, so Pylint is not something I've used extensively before. I've used Flake8, which I still use like for like silly things. I disabled the 8 part of it, so like the bytecode style is mostly useless now. It's just churn. I don't care for it at all. But the other things, and there's plenty of plugins for it. For example, I started a plugin a few years back called Bugbear that kind of goes a little outside of what PyFlakes was just originally doing, So finding stuff like, you just throwing bare exceptions and or like, catching bare exceptions just by saying except colon, or doing a bunch of things that we're working on Python 2 but are no longer working on Python 3, and we sniffed out that this file is clearly Python 3, so the thing that you're attempting is not going to work, and a bunch of like other checks. So there's plenty of those there. So I would say that, maybe in a week I would have at least like one case where Flake8 would find something for me that just saved me a round trip of trying to run it and failing. So it's just a speed up that, it doesn't cost you much. It is very primitive because it only looks at a single file at a time. So it won't do stuff that MyPy can do. I actually always had the dream to build a linter on top of MyPy. The plugin API there is a little terse, so it's not going to be easy. But, with the knowledge that MyPy has of your code base, you could do much nicer linting messages if you wanted to go outside of just type checking, right?
Yeah. We got a question here that I'll grab, which is thoughts on auto rerunning unit tests on file save. So, I think, first of all, you should have unit tests, obviously, but this is something I've always kind of wondered about, because like for when I work on PyPI, for example, which we call a warehouse, that's the code base. It has a lot of unit tests. We actually have 100% test coverage, which is a bit insane, but there's a lot of unit tests. And I've always wanted something that like could determine what files I've just changed and then just run the unit tests that, because it knows, which tests are activating which lines of code. And if I could do the inverse, I could just automatically run those tests whenever I write. But I don't think anything like that exists. I don't know of anything quite like that besides just running.
Oh, did we lose Dustin? Okay, so maybe until we get him back, I'll take over. So what I've been doing myself is to actually have unit tests that I'm working on to be like literally kind of on a loop or something. Like I couldn't really rerun tests, for example, for a project like HDB where they run like 10 minutes on my box, because those are also extensive. But just having the thing that you're working on, on a loop, like it's very nice. And there are file system watchers that can just rerun a comment when there's a file save. So I've been using that. Yeah, you're back, Dustin.
I'm back. Sorry. Yeah,
Cool.
Texas internet's a little bit weird these days. So yeah, it sounds like maybe you have a tool that kind of does that, which is nice. You'll have to tell me about it later.
Yeah, I might just post a link to what I'm using. It's essentially, it's like, sadly it's a JavaScript tool, but it's just a file watcher. So like, who cares? Yeah.
And then we have another question: thoughts on PyProject.toml. So I have thoughts here. I know you have thoughts here
Right?
too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I think one of the problems in the packaging ecosystem is that there are a lot of tools, and sometimes it's sort of perceived that they're competing. And I don't think they are. I mean, we have lots of different use cases and workflows, and the tools are volunteer supported, so they can't be a panacea to everyone. But yeah, one thing that we try to do across all of them is try to find some standardization so things can behave in a similar way, produce the same artifacts, that kind of thing. And PyProject.toml is sort of the start of that standardization across a lot of tools. So one of the things that it implemented, or is being used to implement, is PEP 517 and 18, which is nice because that, those PEPs are quite long, but at the end of the day, they allow you to say, this is the dependencies I need to build my package, not to install it, not to run it, but to actually build it and put it together. And that's something we didn't really have the ability to do before, and we needed a configuration file to put that in. And we sort of decided to land on something that could be reused by tools like Poetry and other projects as well. So that's sort of where that is going itself. And it's a config file, so there's going to be a lot of other stuff in there eventually, I think. And we're trying to standardize on that file, but I know it caused problems for you at one point too, though.
Yeah, well, like the history there is that Black didn't originally have a configuration file, right? The entire premise was that you just run it. If you really want to have like this different line length, you could always just integrate it with whatever else you had around. But kind of there were actually good arguments, good pragmatic arguments around having a config file. So I looked around for what to choose, and at the time, like people from PyPA told me like, hey, use PyProject like this is gonna be the standard. Just forget about setup CFG. It's gonna be, you know, like the thing of the past in a year. So just use that instead. And I did. And for a while, I was the only user of that file, I think, really. Like then poetry came along as well, but you know, like the two just lived together, you know, like with no issues. And when Pip switched to actually looking at PyProject, like then we got a lot of feedback about like, hey, you should have never used this file. You should use something else. Now things are breaking Pip just because, you know, like Black is using the same, but that is also long solved. So yeah, no foul.
Okay, that was awesome. Thank you guys for sharing everything with us. The chat was going crazy, sending links back and forth. Everybody learning a ton of new stuff. So I really loved it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, we were very happy to be invited. You know, it's very sad this couldn't actually happen in Vancouver. It's my favorite place on earth. So I hope to come back there like very soon.
Yeah, and I'll say I think I can speak for Łukasz as well, but both of us, you know, feel free to reach out if you have other questions about some of the stuff we were talking about or want to help with projects that we work on. We're both we're on Twitter. I think maybe links are on the schedule or something else, but you can find us.
Yeah,
Feel free to reach out. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks. And now we're heading off to lunch. We'll have 1 hour for lunch and we'll be back here at 1:15 talking about Circuit Python. It's going to be awesome. I'll see you all there. Here then. Bye.
Bye.